Okay. Uh, so good afternoon to all my learners. In the previous discussion, we have covered some of the important things like capacity building of the grassroots level functionaries, and also in that context, we have covered this knowledge networking, then also community empowerment, and also the role of civil society. That how that the role of civil society has become very important, and particularly in this process of democratic decentralization. Civil society is the hope of the new world order because it operates in a space left vacant by both the state and also the market. Then awareness of the rights is also very important because people's vigilance is always important. Their education, their consciousness, their level of vigilance is most important in the successful working of this process of democratic decentralization. Now, I think we are almost towards the closure of this the chapters on this democratic decentralization. We shall now touch upon sustainable development and challenges to decentralized governance. What is sustainable development and what are the challenges which are confronting this decentralized governance? For last few decades, particularly after 1980s, we shall find that sustainable development has become a catchword. And naturally, our discussion on decentralized governance or democratic decentralization shall be incomplete unless a reference is made to this concept of sustainable development. What is this concept of sustainable development? Virtually, it's a buzzword, it's a catchword. In most of the policies and programs of the nation states all over the world, this is a term which has been popularized all over the world, both the developed nations and also the developing nations. In all these nations, this has become a very, very popular word, a catchword. Because, for instance, for last few days, what are we experiencing? Terrible summer, terrible heat. And what is that? Not that during summer it's natural, during winter it's natural, there shall be winter and all that. But now excessive heat, things become so. Virtually, there is a big change in the climate change, global warming. So, naturally, we are experiencing terrible environmental hazards. The other day, there may be news of the water level of the oceans rising up, ice melting, then also rise in the atmosphere that is of the gas like carbon monoxide, ozone depletion. So, we are coming across so much of environmental hazards. We say, oh, so terrible heat. Even it is not a month of May, still then the temperature shoots high as 46, 45, like that. It is all because of the imbalance in the climate, because of the depletion in natural resources, deforestation. So, these events like pollution, air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution, soil erosion, melting of glaciers, these are all related to this environmental hazards. But, but the thing is that in what way these natural calamities, this natural imbalancement, it has affected the policy making activity. Why these issues have become so prominent nowadays? India, for its part, has also been playing an active role towards conserving environment, protection of environment. Because policies and programs of the government are directly or indirectly related to the resource management of a particular nation. Because natural resources, they provide the life support system. You know, what is the main intent of the policies of the state? To develop. Development policies. ଆପଣଙ୍କୁ ଗୋଟେ ମୁଁ ଏଇ କଣ୍ଟେକ୍ସଟରେ କହିବାକୁ ଚାହେଁ, now it is high time that the development policies are redefined. So there is a big, I mean, the emphasis is it is no more a socialistic model of development, no more a capitalistic model of development, but now we think in terms of sustainable development. Sustainable development, that is why it has become a catchword, very important catchword. ତେଣୁ sustainable development context को आखि आगे रखी policies are being made. We want development, for example, a state definitely want development, कारण ଆମର development project न होले ଲୋକମାନଙ୍କର economic standard बढ़िबनी, ସେମାନଙ୍କର livelihood ର upliftment हबनी. So to provide them the adequate or necessary means of livelihood, development activities are a must. But development policies and programs should be so checked out that development process of a nation should not interfere with the natural resources unnecessarily. Natural resource को हमें निश्चित भाବରେ we'll have to utilize, because that is the resource base. Nature provides the resource base of the development. So unless we utilize nature, development is not possible. But the thing is that we must know where to halt. Too much of natural and resources, utilization of the natural resources, or unnecessary utilization of the natural resources shall land us in difficulty. So what really has happened in the developed world, There is rampant economic growth, industrialization, urbanization, and they engage themselves in massive hard effort to overuse nature. And the result is that at a particular point of time, the we face natural calamities, hazards. Resources are the natural resource is facing hazards. So environmental ethics is most important. Sustainable development ଆମେ ବର୍ତ୍ତମାନ define କରିବା that how sustainable development has really become most significant parameter to decide the economic and political policies of a particular nation. It may be developed nation or it may be a developing nation, doesn't matter. All the nations they emphasize on wise use of nature for our sustenance, for the economic development of the nation. Definitely, interference with the nature is required, right? But this intervention or interference with the nature should be cautious. So there should be wise use of nature. You see the term, cautious intervention. ଆମେ ଯେତିକି ଆବଶ୍ୟକ ଆମ ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟ ଆମେ ସେତିକି ନେଚରକୁ ଡିପ୍ଲିଟ୍ କରିବା ବା ୟୁଟିଲାଇଜ କରିବା, ନଟ୍ ବିୟଣ୍ଡ ଦ୍ୟାଟ୍. So the management of resources is easier said than done. ତେଣୁ ପ୍ରତ୍ୟେକ ନେସନ ଇଭନ୍ ୱେଷ୍ଟର୍ଣ୍ଣ ୱାର୍ଲଡରେ ମଧ୍ୟ when the policies development policies are made, they are coupled with environmental considerations. They must be eco-friendly. Also the same thing in our country. It needs massive effort, not only in the central level but also in the state level, to meticulously work out the modalities of integrating the goal of sustainable development with governance or decentralized governance in particular. So from a positive angle, decentralized governance can help a great deal in accomplishing these constructive goals in tandem with the national policy. So it's an ongoing process also in our country, in India. So what is then sustainable development? ଆମେ ସଷ୍ଟେନେବଲ ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟକୁ ଜାଣିବାକୁ ହେଲେ ଗୋଟେ ରିପୋର୍ଟ ବିଷୟରେ ଉପରକୁ ଆମେ ଦୃଷ୍ଟିପାତ କରିବା. That report is called Brundtland Commission report. It was published in 1987 and the title of the report is Our Common Future. So I think for the first time in 1987 this Brundtland Commission has given us a very clear cut definition as to what is sustainability. Sustainable development ର ଅର୍ଥ କ'ଣ? It has defined that sustainable development is the development which meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. So please remember, this is the most wisely used definition. probably the most acceptable definition about sustainable development. Please remember, again I am repeating that definition. It, it means development which meets the needs of the present. Suppose we are the members of the present generation. Definitely, our state shall try to make the development policies to meet our needs. But while making so, the needs of the future generation should not be compromised. So please remember, what is the guideline? Sustainable development प्रथम guideline है environmental ethics. That it is a continuity, and our generation is a part of a continuous process. From the past we have come, I mean this human generation, it continues, and also it continues to the posterity, to the generations to come. तार माने देखो sustainable development रे there are many important components to be seen, I mean to be considered. The needs of the present generation should be accommodated, right? But we should not overuse the nature so that the needs of the future generation should be hampered. What example, for example, I'm going. Suppose we want a development project. For that, a forest. So suppose to establish a factory, we require deforestation. A forest is to be cut. But if deforestation shall be on a massive scale, it shall lead to environmental hazards, pollutions, ozone depletion. Then the very existence of the human being shall be at stake. I mean deforestation saito we should also regenerate forests. So the quality of the human life must be maintained. आमे जेतिकी जंगल ध्वंस करिबा ताठो अधिका ताको रिजेनरेट करिवार चेष्टा करिबा. गोटिए गछ काटिले ता बदल रे 10 टी गछ को लगेबा. So that when that forest will grow, that shall cater to the needs of the future generation. So improving the quality of human life and also the right of the unborn जो माने एपर्यंत पृथ्वी के आसी नांती आमे तांको विषय मध्ये भाबिबा. देखंतु केते इंपोर्टेंट कांसेप्ट सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट रे. The rights of the future generation were yet to come to the earth. The World Conservation Strategy report defined it as the integration of conservation and development to ensure that modifications to the planet indeed secure the survival and well-being of all people. So, the resource exploitation continued unmindful of the consequences till it was realized that the resources are actually being overexploited. Monish, actually, what is the wrong with the policymakers up till now? That humans, while emphasizing on the development needs, they forget that the resource base is finite. It is not infinity. आम पाखे जो प्राकृतिक संपद रही इनफाइनाइट नुहे. If we shall overuse, a day will come that it shall be completely depleted. Then human life itself is at stake. मनुष्य जीवन जो समय विपन्न हम समय डेवलपमेंट अर्थ कौन? There is no point in development process. There is no point in that. So in actually in the developed societies like America, जो मैंने प्रथम development process को आगे ले, urbanization, industrialization and चले. 1960s रे actually environmental threat देखा दिला प्रथम. And when there is environmental threat because of rapid urbanization, rapid industrialization, what really happened, the new generation started thinking in terms of conserving nature. That is why a new environmental movement, has come up. ଆପଣମାନଙ୍କର ବି ମନେ ଥିବ 1960s ରେ ଗୋଟେ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାଣ୍ଟ ବହି ଆକ୍ଚୁଆଲି ବାହାରିଲା, ତାକୁ ଲେଖିଥିଲେ ରାଚେଲ କାର୍ସନ, and you know what is the book? Silent Spring. The name of the book is Silent Spring. It drew the attention of the world to the destruction of wildlife by the use of pesticide, that is DDT. It was a clarion call against the use of DDT, the pesticide. That the use of this DDT, it has really destroyed the wildlife. କାରଣ ଆମର ହ୍ୟୁମାନ ଲାଇଫ ପରି ମଧ୍ୟ ନନ୍ ହ୍ୟୁମାନ ଲାଇଫ ଇଜ ଅଲସୋ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାଣ୍ଟ। ତେଣୁ ଏନଭାୟରମେଣ୍ଟାଲ ଏଥିକ୍ସ emphasizing on the rights of the non-human world, the right of the trees, the right of the animals. କାରଣ ଇକୋସିଷ୍ଟମ କନସେପ୍ଟଟା ଦେଖନ୍ତୁ ସଷ୍ଟେନେବଲ ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟ ସହିତ ଇକୋସିଷ୍ଟମ କନସେପ୍ଟଟା ହେଉଛି ଜଡ଼ିତ। ଇକୋସିଷ୍ଟମ ମିନ୍ସ it is an entirety. The life of the human being is also a part of the general life. ସେଥିପାଇଁ ଗୋଟେ କନସେପ୍ଟ କୁହାଯାଇଛି ୱେବ୍ ଅଫ୍ ଲାଇଫ। ହ୍ୟୁମାନ ଲାଇଫ ତା ମଧ୍ୟ ଗୋଟେ ଟ୍ରିର ଲାଇଫ ବା ଆନିମାଲ ଲାଇଫ ସହିତ ଜଡ଼ିତ। if the trees will vanish, human life also will vanish. ଆମେ କାହାକୁ ନେଇକି ବଞ୍ଚିବା? ଆମେ ଗଛରୁ ଫଳଟିଏ ପାଉଛେ, କ୍ଷେତରୁ ଆମେ ଫସଲ ବାଡ଼ି ପାଉଛେ, ସେଥିରେ ବଞ୍ଚୁଛେ। if that shall be destroyed, then we shall be destroyed. So virtually ecosystem is a holistic concept. So it thinks in terms of the web of life. Life means it is not only human life, it is also life of the plants. ତେଣୁ ସାଇଲେଣ୍ଟ ସ୍ପ୍ରିଙ୍ଗ ଯୋଉଟା ରାଚେଲ କାର୍ସନ ପ୍ରଥମେ ଲେଖିଥିଲେ, ଡେଭଲପ୍ଡ ୱାର୍ଲଡରେ ସେଟା ଗୋଟେ it creates shock wave. It was a call against the use of DDT, the pesticide, which was the cause of destruction of the wildlife. So the authoress, she warned that these chemicals contain the prospect of the dying world in which springtime would no longer bring forth leaves to new life, but it shall only bring silence. ଦେଖନ୍ତୁ କେତେ symbolically ସେ ବହିର ନାଁଟା ଦେଇଥିଲେ, ସାଇଲେଣ୍ଟ ସ୍ପ୍ରିଙ୍ଗ। ସ୍ପ୍ରିଙ୍ଗ shall be silent. କାରଣ ସ୍ପ୍ରିଙ୍ଗ ଟାଇମରେ ନୂଆ ଲିଜ୍ ଅଫ ଲାଇଫ ଆସିବନି, because it shall be only a silent spring. No cuckoos, no birds, no chirping of the birds, no lease of new life. It shall only bring silence. So Carson revealed that our actions would lead to seriously damaging environmental consequences when we interfere with the natural systems. So conserve nature, then only human beings shall be conserved, the life can be preserved, and then only development are possible. Development policy टाको ଆମେ ଆଖି ବୁଜା ଭାବରେ नेचर टाको डिप्लीट करी, ताको ओवर यूज करी, ताको ओवर एक्सप्लॉइट करी कि हमें डेवलपमेंट पॉलिसीज को तैयारी करी पार है। सो यूनाइटेड नेशंस जनरल असेंबली 1983 रे वर्ल्ड कमिशन ऑन एनवायरनमेंट एंड डेवलपमेंट को एस्टैब्लिश कला, दैट इज WCED, विथ द नॉर्वेजियन प्राइम मिनिस्टर मिसेस हार्लेम ब्रुटलैंड, जोटा कि ब्रुटलैंड कमिशन तांकर अंडर रे बसिला एंड से रिपोर्टर ना हूँ आवर कमन फ्यूचर जी कि सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट रो गोटे प्रिसाइज डेफिनेशन देते एंड वेरी पर्टिनेंट आल्सो डेफिनेशन. So today in this period of market driven economy and globalization, there is an immense competition between the various nations to reap maximum benefits. And the developing countries especially are compelled to use their resources in an uneconomical manner. So Brundtland Commission has argued that in a world marked by extreme poverty, people are compelled to use resources in an erratic manner for meeting their immediate needs. Immediate need टाକୁ ସେମାନେ ଆଗ ଫୁଲଫିଲ୍ କରିବାକୁ ବେଶୀ ଚେଷ୍ଟିତ ଅଛନ୍ତି. ତେଣୁ ସେମାନେ ଦୂରଦୃଷ୍ଟି ସମ୍ପନ୍ନ ହେବା ଦରକାର. That it has its far-reaching consequences. Therefore, the key to development is welfare of the people with a simultaneous nurturing of the natural resources. I think you, my dear learners, you can understand the importance of sustainability. केवल डेवलपमेंट पर एम्फासाइज कले हबनी. इट मस्ट बी सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट. द डेवलपमेंट मस्ट बी कंटिन्यूअस. द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ द प्रेजेंट जनरेशन एंड आल्सो द डेवलपमेंट फॉर द फ्यूचर सोसाइटीज. So there are two distinct dimensions of the human need: the fulfillment of basic needs like food, clothing, shelter and clear environment, and second, the option of pursuing a chosen lifestyle in terms of materialistic possessions. Developed countries were successful through early industrialization in providing these comforts to their population, but they have not been able to secure the advanced technology which would ensure a better life to their citizens by conserving nature. Now, there is I mean, need to establish an interlinkage between sustainable development and governance. शासन एवं निरंतर विकास. सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट को आम जब ओडिया कहवा तार अर्थ हो निरंतर विकास, कंटिन्यूअस. National Human Development Report in 2001, it states that governance for human development relates to the management of all such processes that in any society define the environment which permits and enables the individuals to raise their capacity levels on the one hand and provide opportunities to realize their potential and enlarge the set of available choices on the other. ତେଣୁ ରିପୋର୍ଟରେ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ର ଆକ୍ସନ ବା ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ର ରୋଲ୍ ଉପରେ ଏମ୍ଫାସିସ୍ ଦିଆହେଇଛି. Who is the most important environmental manager? Is the state. In the modern world, who is the most significant or important environmental manager? Is the state. କାରଣ ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ ହିଁ ପଲିସି ତିଆରି କରୁଛି. ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ ଏନଭାୟରମେଣ୍ଟାଲ ପଲିସି କରିବ, ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟ ପଲିସି କରିବ, ସେମାନଙ୍କ ଭିତରେ ଗୋଟେ କୋର୍ଡିନେସନ ସ୍ଥାପନ କରିବ, ନ୍ୟାଚୁରାଲ କନଜରଭେସନ କେମିତି ହବ ସେ ବିଷୟରେ ବି ଚିନ୍ତା କରିବ ଏବଂ ତା ସହିତ ମଧ୍ୟ ଇକୋନୋମିକ ଗ୍ରୋଥ ବି କେମିତି ହବ. So the report reiterates that state is responsible for creating a favorable political, legal and economic environment for building individual capabilities and encouraging private initiative. And governance, therefore, requires the states to exercise their power through various designated bodies and pursue the said goals through an equitable, socially sensitive, and participatory approach involving the people at large. ତେଣୁ ଦେଖନ୍ତୁ ଗୋଟେ ପଲିସି ଏନଭାୟରମେଣ୍ଟାଲି କେତେବେଳେ ସେନ୍ସିଟିଭ ହବ? The policy through which the state decides the fate of the citizens shall be eco-friendly or environmentally sensitive only when people shall participate. ସେଥିପାଇଁ ମୁଁ previous discussion ଗୁଡାକରେ ଆମେ emphasize କରିଛେ, for example, joint forest management, social forestry. While creating the village woodlots, the people must participate because the people know their needs best. And through their participation, their aspiration, their needs can reach the policymakers. The policymakers are the persons, those who are at the helm of affairs of the state, shall get to know about the needs of the people, those who are really leading, staying at the grassroots level. So remember, people's participation. That is why grassroots participation of the people, which is mostly possible through local governance, can only bring sustainable development. Gradually how we correlate the concept of sustainable development with local governance or decentralized governance. The governance, for sustainable governance, it should include an integrated approach of economic and environmental concerns in the development strategies. So we should not overemphasize only on economic aspect, but also the economic dimension of this policy making should be duly considered. So, keeping in view not only the quality of life that has to be offered to its citizens, but also an equal distribution of it with social equity. So, quality of life से तो social equity, ये दीटा को merge करके हमारा policy making should be decided. So, governance should also safeguard citizens' right to develop, simultaneously holding the environmental concerns at a high pedestal. So, the prerequisites towards achieving these goals, these aims, it include democracy, autonomy, fairness, interdependence, responsibility, and also accountability. And that is the very theme of integrated environmental management. So a government should incorporate these qualities before it formulates its policies and programs for the betterment of a society. There are many virtues which are related to these requests, which the requisites which I have just mentioned. A democratic government has various mechanisms and institutions which confer certain fundamental rights to its citizens and basically the right to participate. ସବୁଠାରୁ important democratic right is the right to participate, to take part in decision making. Then the development choices should be determined by the people and also government together with a certain degree of autonomy. Development choice can decide କଲା ବେଳେ It should not be one-sided affair by the government. People and government both must sit together to decide the development choices. Then the resource of the planet need to be sustained, shared in an equitable manner. Because this is the only earth for us. ଆମେ ଯୋଉ ବିଶ୍ୱରେ ବାସ କରୁଛେ କାହିଁକି ଆମେ ତାର ୱାଇଜ୍ ୟୁଜ୍ ଉପରେ ଏତେ ଏମ୍ଫାସାଇଜ୍ କରୁଛେ ସଷ୍ଟେନେବିଲିଟି ଉପରେ? Because this is the only earth. This is the only planet where at least life is possible. ଆମର ଏତେ ସାଇଣ୍ଟିଫିକ୍ inventions discoveries ହେଲା ପରେ ବି ଆମେ ଏପର୍ଯ୍ୟନ୍ତ ସିଓର ନହୁଁ whether life is available in other planets. So we must conserve our planet. Otherwise ଆଜି ଆମେ ଯଦି trees ମାନଙ୍କୁ extinct କରିଦେଲେ by our development policies, or in the process gradually the non-human world also has become extinct, what shall be the logical end? Actually gradually human beings are also shall be extinct if this erratic behavior with the nature shall be pursued. So I think Taylor's one book I have been reminded, that is called Replenish the Earth. ଆମେ ଆର୍ଥ ରୁ ଯେତିକି ୟୁଜ୍ କରୁଛେ ଆମେ ସେତିକି ପୁଣି ତାକୁ ଦେଇଦବା। ମୁଁ ଯୋଉଟା ଗୋଟେ ଏକ୍ସାମ୍ପଲ ଦେଲି, ଆମେ ଯେତିକି ଫରେଷ୍ଟ ଆମର ଦରକାର ଇଣ୍ଡଷ୍ଟ୍ରି ପାଇଁ ଆମେ ଯଦି କାଟିଲେ ସେତିକି ଫରେଷ୍ଟ ତାଠାରୁ ଅଧିକାକୁ ଆମେ କ୍ରିଏଟ୍ କରିବା, ରିଜେନେରେଟ୍ କରିବା। Replenishing the earth, because this is the only planet having life support system. ଆମେ ଧର ଅକ୍ସିଜେନ, ୱାଟର, ଆର୍ଥ, ଆମେ ଯାହା କହୁଛେ ଆମର ଶରୀର, ଆମେ କହୁଛେ ପଞ୍ଚ ମହାଭୂତର ଶରୀର, air, water, soil, everything is available only in this planet. We must conserve it. Then the resource of the planet need to be naturally sustained, and it must be shared in an equitable manner. Then with an increased level of globalization, there should be interdependence between the nations in terms of technology transfer, providing assistance towards development project, and also extending cooperation. ସବୁଠାରୁ ଇଣ୍ଟରେଷ୍ଟିଂ ଜିନିଷ ଦେଖନ୍ତୁ, with industrialization, with heavy urbanization, with advancement of technology, developed societies, developed so-called developed countries, they have some sort of arrogance with them. But now it is not the case. The developed and underdeveloped or developing societies, they must come together to the same platform. With the cooperation only, the world resources can be conserved. Otherwise, it is no more what is called technological arrogance of the advanced societies, advanced nations. It is no more that wisdom is power. It is now a question of sharing the technology, transfer of technology, applying appropriate rural technology, that we can conserve nature. Then it is the responsibility of every citizen to preserve and protect the environment and to achieve development without harming the interest of the fellow citizens. Individual स्तରରେ ମଧ୍ୟ sustainable development ର जो policy ବା the very intrinsic ethics ଟାକୁ ମଧ୍ୟ ଆମେ follow କରିପାରିବା। ଯୋଉଟା କି ଆମେ କହିପାରିବା, there is a good slogan associated with environmentalism, that is think globally, act locally. Think globally, act locally. Suppose on the individual level, it may not be possible to clean all the world, but we can maintain cleanliness in our own personal level. In my own house, in my own street, in my village, I can make it clean. I can make it eco-friendly. I can make it environmentally sound. I can plant number of trees near my vicinity. Most of the whole world plantation, but if every individual shall practice this, environmental friendly or eco-friendly activities, then you see sustainable growth is possible, sustainable development. So individual level of efforts avashyakta achi. So it is the responsibility of every individual. Then every nation also is a stakeholder in the global environment and is entitled to sharing the common benefits. So it is also accountable to the damages caused, intentionally हो बा unintentionally हो, जो डैमेज टा परिवेश प्रति होची ସେଥିପାଇଁ ପ୍ରତ୍ୟେକ ନେସନ କନସିୟସ୍ ହେବା ଦରକାର, କାରଣ ସବୁ କଣ୍ଟ୍ରି ହଉଛନ୍ତି ତାର ଷ୍ଟେକ୍ ହୋଲ୍ଡର। So all the countries must be held accountable and is liable to pay compensation in case of occurrence of such incidents. So every nation is a custodian of the natural environment. Every individual also is a custodian of the environment. So nations must try at their level and also individuals must try at their own level. So let us come to some of the fundamental principles which characterize sustainable development. First is conservation of natural resources and biological diversity. ଆପଣମାନେ ଅଳ୍ପ ବହୁତ ଜାଣିଥିବେ डाइवर्सिटी को केमती बायोडाइवर्सिटी की केमती कंजर्व करा जिवो, दैट इज द मोस्ट इंपोर्टेंट थिंग नाउ। तेणु आपण देखिए बहुत कंट्रीज मानकरे नेशन मानकरे वाइल्ड लाइफ सैंक्चुअरीज करा होची, बायोडाइवर्सिटी रो कंजर्व करा होची, एक्सटिंक्ट स्पेसीज जुड़ा को धीरे धीरे लुप्त हो जाउछन्ती ताकू केमती प्रिजर्व करा जिवो, ताकू आउथरे केमती बढ़ेवा पई गोटे कंजेनियल एटमॉस्फेयर सृष्टि करा जाय परिबो से विषय चिंता करा होची। So natural resources and biological diversity of conservation. Then deterrence of harmful effects on environment. धरो तो हम जो Rachel Carson को silent spring टा कहीं पढ़िले, what is the slogan there? Their message is that pesticides are harmful for life, human life कौन हमरो wild life प्रति मध्यता विपद सृष्टि कला, and gradually also that shall create harm for the human life. So deterrence of the harmful effects of environment. Economy of environment को गोटे बैलेंसिंग जोन भीतर रखा जिवो। आपण देखिए इकोलॉजी एंड इकोनॉमी दे बोथ कम फ्रॉम द सेम वर्ड इकोस, somewhere or other they have a connection. So for the origin of the words ecology and economics concerned. So environment and economy, they must be integrated. Then training and awareness programs on environmental protection. हमें gradually आसवा केमती डेमोक्रेटिक डिसेंट्रलाइजेशन रे विभिन्न स्तर रे मध्ये लोक मध्ये डेमोक्रेटिक एनवायरमेंटल वैल्यूज सहित जड़ित करा जिवो। So we have already emphasized that how there is a link between governance and sustainable development, and there is a need to integrate the dynamics of society, ecology and economy, and that is the reason that another fundamental principle is cooperative and participatory approach. Already se bisare mu kahichi je lokankar involvement, environment ro conservation ta without participation of the people is not possible. सेति आपण देखु जते environmental movement heichi, that is successful only when people participate, irrespective of color, creed, political ideology, doesn't matter, because environment is a platform where there is no political difference. Elections may be fought over the differences of political ideology, but members of different political parties, they must agree that the environment must be protected, nature must be conserved, natural resource conservation upre तामने कौन सी द्विमत नहीं, irrespective of political creed, political ideology, irrespective of the economic status. कारण देखो तो environmental conservation जदि affected है, both the rich and poor shall be also affected. You know, economic status also cannot help you. If you are a rich man, not that you shall escape the environmental hazard. You can escape the disease. ଅନେକ ଏନଭାୟରମେଣ୍ଟାଲିଷ୍ଟ ମଧ୍ୟ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ବିକଜ ଅଫ୍ ଦିସ୍ ଆକ୍ଟିଭିଟିଜ, ବିକଜ ଅଫ୍ ଡିପ୍ଲିସନ ଅଫ ଜୋନ୍ ଆଣ୍ଡ it has many carcinogenic impacts, many dreaded diseases that spreading, so everybody can be affected. So there is a need to sustainable development in urban and rural areas by providing one atmosphere where quality of life can be maintained. A good life is a quality life. What are the basic amenities? I mean, fundamentally, देखिबा, food, shelter, clothing are the basic amenities. The United Nations also, it has brought out a concept paper, ଆପଣ ମାନେ more or less ଜାଣିଛନ୍ତି, Millennium Development Goals, ସହସ୍ରାବ୍ଦ ବିକାଶ ଲକ୍ଷ୍ୟ, Millennium Development Goals, which aims at realizing the goals of decent standard of living to the population all over the world within a set period of time. ୟୁନାଇଟେଡ୍ ନେସନ୍ର ଗୋଟେ ସହସ୍ରାବ୍ଦ ବିକାଶ ଲକ୍ଷ୍ୟ ଯେ ଆମେ ସହସ୍ରାବ୍ଦ ଭିତରେ ଏଇ ବିକାଶମୂଳକ ଆକ୍ଟିଭିଟିସ୍ କରିବୁ ଯେଉଁଥିରେ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାଣ୍ଟ ଥିଙ୍ଗ ହେଉଛି ଏନଭାୟରନମେଣ୍ଟାଲ କନଜରଭେସନ। The process of globalization, it bestowed certain benefits on various nations, including India. But it is disheartening to note that many of these benefits have not reached many secluded sections of the society. ତେଣୁ ଯୋଉ ବେସିକ୍ ଆମ୍ୟୁନିଟିସ୍ କଥା ଆମେ କହୁଛେ, ଏତେ ଆମର ଇକୋନୋମିକ ପ୍ରୋଗ୍ରାମସ୍ କରାହେଉଛି, ଡେଭଲପମେଣ୍ଟ ପ୍ରୋଜେକ୍ଟସ୍ କରାହେଉଛି, ଏତେ ପ୍ରକାର ପଲିସିସ୍ ଗଭର୍ଣ୍ଣମେଣ୍ଟ ପର୍ସୁ କରୁଛି, ତଥାପି ଡିସଆଡଭାଣ୍ଟେଜ ବା ଲୋଏଷ୍ଟ ରଙ୍ଗ ଅଫ୍ ଦି କ୍ୟାଡର, ସୋସାଇଟିର ସବୁଠାରୁ ତଳ ସ୍ତରରେ ରହୁଥିବା ଲୋକଙ୍କ ପାଖରେ ସେ ବେନିଫିଟ୍ ମଧ୍ୟ ପହଞ୍ଚି ପାରିନାହିଁ। So still the villagers in the rural level, they are prone to unhygienic conditions of living, contagious diseases. Urban situation also କିଛି better ନୁହେଁ, not that the poor people residing in the urban areas they are having a better life, no, the situation is equally precarious. But without these basic amenities, an individual's right to well-being and sustenance, they're eroded, they're encroached upon. ସେ ଅଧିକାର କିଛି ତାମାନେ ଅର୍ଥ ନାହିଁ, they're only paper rights. If I have no roof over my head, ତେବେ right to shelter ଅର୍ଥ କ'ଣ ରହିଲା? So there is a need of reduction of poverty, and also there is a need of good standard of living. Good standard of living, it implies the reduction of poverty, and this is a part of the Millennium Development Goals. The measures towards integrating environment and sustainable development in poverty reduction programs. So, in most of the developing countries, policies to reduce poverty is emphasized. A good standard of living is determined in terms of higher income level and attainment of a higher average life expectancy, higher literacy, higher value as per Human Development Index. And this progress automatically leads to an increasing level of GNP, that is gross national product, which in turn makes an impact on higher public expenditure and lower poverty levels. So there should be a participatory mode involving people at all levels. Then only poverty reduction programs can be successful. It can attain its goal. Income generation is also another important issue. A substantial number of people are living below poverty line. The sustainable development becomes all the more important in the rural sector. And what options can a government give to its population to earn their livelihood? What are the schemes it can undertake to generate income? Employment generation ସେଥିପାଇଁ ଆପଣ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଦେଖିବେ ୱେଲଫେୟାର ଷ୍ଟେଟ୍ର ସବୁଠୁ ବଡ଼ ଜିନିଷ ହେଲା ଇନକମ୍କୁ ଜେନେରେଟ୍ କରିବାର ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରୋଗ୍ରାମ୍ସ ତାକୁ କେମିତି ସେମାନେ ସ୍ପ୍ରେଡ୍ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ତାକୁ କେମିତି ସେମାନେ ଫିଲ୍ଡ କରୁଛନ୍ତି ସୋ ଦ୍ୟାଟ୍ there shall be income generation. The urban areas, they are seen as potential income generation with the concentration of many engineering, heavy metals, garment, software industries. Compared to rural areas, urban areas they provide more of income generating units. କାରଣ ବେଶୀ ଏଠି ଇଣ୍ଡଷ୍ଟ୍ରିଜ ଦେଖିବା ସଫ୍ଟୱେୟାର ବା ହେଭି ମେଟାଲର ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାର ସେକ୍ଟର ଦେଖିବା that means there is more of opportunity for employment and naturally for income. Rural area रे ଦେଖିବାକୁ ଗଲେ କେବଳ ଗୋଟେ predominant source of income ହେଉଛି agriculture. But though agriculture is a predominant occupation in rural areas, enough of measures have not been taken by the government to revitalize that particular sector. And rural sector रे जदि income generation unit ठीक से हमें generate करि पारलेनी तांको sufficiently ମଧ୍ୟ ଆମେ income जोगी पारलेनी तबे what is the net consequence? There shall be migration. People migrate from the rural sector to the urban sector. So the resultant effect is the mass migration of the people from rural to the urban areas. And it has also its severe crisis, associated crisis of providing job opportunities, generating sufficient levels of income. Wide variety of natural resources was put under severe constraints for meeting the livelihood needs. Over migration रे कौन होबो naturally ସେମାନଙ୍କ ପାଇଁ sufficient amenities ବ୍ୟବସ୍ଥା କରିବା ବି ଗୋଟେ difficult ହେଇଯିବ. So sustainable development, provision of the sustainable development shall be a remote possibility under such a situation. So though varied efforts regarding sustainable human development have been undertaken, not enough income was generated to meet the required needs. Now another important discussion is sustainable development by environmental conservation. What are the challenges? There are numerous challenges to this sustainable development in India, particularly in our case. We shall have more of emphasis. हमें इस discussion जानले जे most of the environmental problems are because of our unwise use of natural resources. हम तक ठीक से विनियोग करि पारुने. So the challenges are both natural and also man-made. किछि आह्वान रही जोड़ा को मनुष्यर निज कर्म द्वारा तैयारी होची and some other challenges are natural. For example, deforestation. केवल इंडिया का around the world it is becoming one of the biggest challenges for environment. जंगल क्षय all around the world. So virtually there is a higher depletion rate. The individuals, corporations, government agencies, they're responsible for this menace. In the name of development projects, the tree felling is being carried out, leaving behind the goals of sustainable development and human progress. ना अपन देखिए ट्री फेलिंग के नहीं कि बहुत सारे भी environmental movement है जी successfully बहुत जगह रही है. I can give you the example. For example, in the foothills of Himalayas, the Garhwal region, the Chipko movement, jar leader thile Sundarlal Bahuguna, they became successful. Forest contractors, they, in spite of the lease given to them by government policy, they could not cut the trees because there is a heavy protest from the natives. Chipko means to hog the trees. They went and hugging the trees that you cannot cut the trees because that will affect our livelihood. If you cut the trees, you are cutting the very means of our livelihood. So you cannot do that. So deforestation definitely is the most serious problem in the field of loss of biodiversity. Destruction of forest leads not only to the extinction of the endangered animal species, but also many plant varieties. Also certain plants which have medicinal values, out of which life-saving drugs they have been prepared. ଅନେକ ବୃକ୍ଷରୁ ମଧ୍ୟ ଆମର ଭର୍ଚୁଆଲି ଆମର ଲାଇଫ୍ ସେଭିଂ ଡ୍ରଗ୍ସ ତିଆରି ହେଉଛି। ତେଣୁ ମେଡିସିନାଲ ପ୍ଲାଣ୍ଟ ଗୁଡାକ ମଧ୍ୟ ଡିଫରେଷ୍ଟେସନ ସମୟରେ ମଧ୍ୟ କନଜର୍ଭ କରିବା ନିହାତି ଜରୁରୀ। କାରଣ ଡିଫରେଷ୍ଟ ହେଲା ମାନେ ଇନଡିସ୍କ୍ରିମିନେଟଲି ସବୁ ପ୍ରକାର ଗଛକୁ ମଣିଷ ଧ୍ୱଂସ କଲା। ସେଥିପାଇଁ ଅନେକ ଜାଗାରେ ଫରେଷ୍ଟ କନଜର୍ଭେସନ ଉପରେ ଗୁରୁତ୍ୱ ଦିଆହେଉଛି। ଥିଙ୍କ ଇନ୍ ଟର୍ମସ୍ ଅଫ୍ ଗନ୍ଧମାର୍ଦ୍ଦନ। ଦେୟାର ଆର୍ ଅଲସୋ ମେଡିସିନାଲ ପ୍ଲାଣ୍ଟସ୍ ଆର୍ ବିଙ୍ଗ କନଜର୍ଭ। ତାକୁ ସଂରକ୍ଷିତ ରଖାଯାଉଛି। Because that is required for human existence. এবং ডিফরেস্টেশন হলে কম হব আজকাল পরিণতি গ্লোবাল ওয়ার্মিং one of the major reasons of global warming is deforestation, or the water of the sea level is rising, glacier melting, এগুলো সব associated problem, and the cause is deforestation. Then also there is a threat to biodiversity. Biodiversity conservation is a must. ବିଭିନ୍ନ ପ୍ରକାର ଜଙ୍ଗଲ ବୃକ୍ଷଲତା ଆନିମଲ ସେମାନଙ୍କୁ କନଜର୍ଭ କରି ରଖାଯିବ। ଏକ୍ସଟିଙ୍କ୍ଟ ସ୍ପେସିସ୍ ମାନଙ୍କୁ ଆପଣ ଦେଖିବେ ବହୁତ ଜାଗାରେ ବହୁତ ୱାଇଲ୍ଡ ଲାଇଫକୁ ମଧ୍ୟ କନଜର୍ଭ କରିବା ପାଇଁ ପ୍ରଚେଷ୍ଟା କରାଯାଉଛି। ପ୍ରୋଜେକ୍ଟସ୍ ଆର୍ ଦେୟାର। ଫର ଏକ୍ସାମ୍ପଲ ଇନ୍ ଆୱାର ଶିମିଳି ପାର୍କ ଇନ୍ ଓଡ଼ିଶା ଦେयर इज टाइगर रिजर्व। इन केस ऑफ चिल्का देयर इज बर्ड सैंक्चुअरी। पक्षी मानकर अभयारण्य सृष्टि कराଯାଇଛି। because their habitat is to be conserved. Habitat माने shelter। आमे जदि घर टी कले रहउचे, forest is their habitat। वाइल्ड लाइफ रो बासगृह कोटा the forest। if you destroy the forest, their habitat is gone। so the biological resources which are on the verge of extinction because of the unwise use or destruction, massive destruction by the human beings, that has become the major challenge. Of course, policies have been made and laws have been made in order to conserve the biodiversity and all that. Then another important thing is the effects on climate change. Then also increasing in pollution level. Degrading levels of air quality, which is very common and also very simple to understand. 2 days back in the newspaper, you must be knowing the urban cities, particularly in Delhi and other metropolitan towns, the air pollution level is so high that the educational institutions are bound to be closed. There is a respiratory problem. There is a respiratory tract diseases, difficulty in breathing. So, the degrading level of air quality, they are widely recognized as a major factor of pollution. Then groundwater depletion and pollution. Safe drinking water is a big problem. Safe drinking water, provision of safe drinking water is a must in human life, but that is now in danger. The shrinking groundwater levels have resulted in acute shortage of water across the nation, especially during the summer seasons. poor health. Developments in the health sector, they're confined basically to urban areas. Moreover, the status of the income too largely determines this access to this health. The recent UNDP report, it also expressed its unhappiness over India's inability to provide health facilities to its population. Then literacy rate, another important challenge. One of the basic components of development is education. You know, the literacy level must be high. It can only also create environmental consciousness, awareness. So it is a critical invasive instrument for bringing about social, economic, and political inclusion and a durable integration of the people with the mainstream. So literacy is also another challenge. Literacy rate should be higher. If people remain illiterate, most of the programs cannot be successful. For example, the female literacy rates continue to lag behind, and the progress is often overshadowed by the disparities in terms of gender, caste groups, and income groups, and at urban and rural levels. Where there is a higher female literacy rate, it has substantially lowered the fertility, infant and child mortality rates also. And it has also instilled confidence among rural women to earn their income by joining the self-help groups and also various women development groups. I mean, literate hele opportunities or avenues shall be open for the women. Their consciousness, their awareness shall be promoted. They can also, so far as the fighting out the health hazards or so far as the income generation is concerned, they can participate more successfully. Then environmental sustainability, which I have already spoken a lot about that. The environmental quality is threatened by urban solid waste. बड़ बड़ सिटी मान तो गार्बेज gather କରାଯାଉଛି household solid waste from the hospitals, scientific laboratories, they have become a major threatening substance for the clean environment. In urban areas, one recurrently comes across heaps of solid waste, gada bag, plastic bags lying on the roadside, dumping yards which are spreading diseases. So the fungi, bacteria, virus pose enormous risk to the health, especially to the residents, those who are living close to these particular garbage areas. So inadequate collection and lack of proper disposal facilities of these waste products, they are the prime reason so far as threatening environment is concerned. So what are the state's responsibilities? The state has enormous responsibility in this regard because I've already told who is the most important manager. The most important environmental manager is the state. At various levels, governmental machinery should involve itself in a very big way to realize this goal. So there can be policy framework at the state level, district level efforts, and also the role of panchayat should be galvanized. adequate support system should be provided so that the role of panchayats or various institutions of democratic decentralization can be effective. First of all, policy framework should be, or the initiative, policy initiative should be there in the central level and the state level, and then also local level. For development without destruction, the government initiates the programs like controlling urban pollution, minimization of deforestation measures, joint forest management, environmental management system, water harvesting, and the government has also given due importance to rural development programs. So the panchayat role, but district level efforts, basically in during the Jilla Parishads, at the level of Jilla Parishad and all that, various efforts also can be pursued in this direction of environmental conservation or sustainable development. The goal of sustainable development is best realized through panchayat raj institutions. तार कारण आम ऑलरेडी जिते चैप्टर पढ़ुली फॉर लास्ट 6 7 days these institutions provide maximum opportunity for people's participation. So participation of the locals on various development projects are possible through these PRIs, Panchayat Raj institutions. परंतु ग्राम पंचायत कहतु, पंचायत समिति कहतु, जिला परिषद कहतु, on the rural side there is PRIs, and also on the urban side like NSCs, municipalities, or the municipal corporations in metropolitan areas and all that. As per the provision, Dharantu 73rd Amendment, I have already talked a lot about that. As per the provisions of that, the Gram Sabha is given power to control the institutions and functions in all social sectors, including activities like ownership of minor forest produce, selection of the beneficiaries under various programs, management of minor water bodies, and minor mineral leases. And the recent proposal of the National Rural Employment Schemes, which are already implemented. And if those schemes can be fairly operative, that can also go a long way in bringing sustainable development. So there are various schemes at these levels, but they must be fairly pursued. Then also role of local communities, very important. In order to ensure efficiency, in order to ensure transparency and sustainability of development initiatives, the local participation should be encouraged. Participatory management and techniques need to be adopted towards achieving these developments. And only earth resources can be protected. Jadi grassroots level ame लोकों participative governance through रे से activity को pursue करि परिबा, then only conservation like forest conservation, producing village woodlots can be possible, and earth resources can be protected. So involvement of the local communities, panchayats, cooperative societies, women groups is a must towards creating the sustained and self-reliant community. In many development process, the policy formulation is never a problem. The problem is with implementation. Policy theory kara hochi, kintu implementation there are a lot of lacuna, lot of pilferage. So there is no shortage of plans and policies in India, but the real concern lies in their implementation. So, at different strata of the society, government requires efficient machinery or institutions to implement them. And the function of these implementing institutions are varied. The functions also include maintenance of law and order, ensure rule of law, freedom of speech, expression, rights of the individual as well as free press. First and foremost of the functionaries of decentralized governance is the government itself. It is responsible for its decisions, actions, and implementation of the policies. And the bureaucracy which is involved in implementation has the decisive powers in administrative matters and is accountable to the citizens at large. And in India, most of the decisions are taken by the bureaucrats who are at the core of administrative machinery. So, efficiency, transparency, or integrity, commitment is expected in that particular level of bureaucracy, which are mostly responsible of implementing the policies and programs of the government. Then finance, one of the crucial aspects of governance, allocation of substantial funds for development. Adequate funds and budget should be directed towards implementation of these programs for sustainable development, and particularly in these local administrative levels. The Planning and Finance Commission play a very significant role in allocating funds. So we can summarize this chapter like sustainable development is the process of improving quality of life by living within the carrying capacity of the supporting ecosystems. The governance for sustainable development should include an integrated approach of economic and environmental concerns in the development strategy. So, economic development and environmental preservation both must go together. So, the policy should be environmentally sensitive. So, policy should be coupled with environmental considerations so that the policy, the development policy cannot act as a hazard on environment or it can create threatening impacts on environment. The decentralized governance helps in promoting human environmental concerns alike. And for this, the pace of integration of the functionaries, and financial machineries needs to be accelerated so that sustainable human development is possible. So now, to further this discussion, what are the roads which are before us in this direction? What are the impact of reforms on Panchayati Raj or the reforms of the municipal bodies? What are the issues, emerging issues which are to be identified? And what are the people's aspirations in the field of local governance? In this particular area of public administration, definitely democratic decentralization is one emerging issue. For last so much of classes, we are discussing about the importance of this trend. And many definitions of decentralization they have emerged in developing countries. The need for decentralization of planning and management function is being increasingly recognized by the developing countries. The development challenges of 1980s, such as increasing participation equity, access, they have re-emphasized the significance of decentralized financial local units of governance and administration. And the very cause of decentralization is now being advanced because it is assumed that a decentralized mode of policy and program implementation is conducive to more effective coordination and consistency. Greater access to governmental activities, increased involvement of the people in the development process, then more efficient delivery of the public service because that is needed to meet the basic needs of the people. And also, what is more important is increased accountability on the part of the government machineries, agencies. So, according to one handbook of public administration, decentralization is a plan of administration which will permit the greatest possible number of action to be taken in the areas, that is provinces, districts, towns and villages where the people reside. That is at various levels, starting from the grassroots up to the uppermost layer. So decentralization has become already a widely applied concept in the present day world. And the popularity of decentralization as a policy to promote development is increasing. The pursuit of administrative decentralization by the governments of developing countries is a demonstration of its popularity in theory, and it serves as an instrument of welfare administration. But in the process, many governments have begun to realize the difficulties in administering lower level units from the capital. Because all along, capital city administration means what? Centralized administration. But gradually, many governments they feel that really the farthest areas where the people need more of basic amenities and to provide them the basic services, it has become gradually difficult. They began to realize the difficulties in administering lower level units from the capital. So, how these difficulties can be overcome? So, administrative machinery should be more effective. And particularly in the countries where the communication is very poor, ଆପଣ ଗୋଟେ remote area ରେ ଧରନ୍ତୁ communication ନାହିଁ, the administration cannot reach, and the population is poorly mobilized. So we can say that the centralized administration is now often considered to be a hindrance to progression and decentralization. And decentralization as a policy for rural development is popular in many third world countries because they are now striving towards development. ଏବଂ ସେମାନେ ଅନେକ ଥାର୍ଡ ୱାର୍ଲଡ କଣ୍ଟ୍ରିଜ କଲୋନିଆଲ ପାୱାରର ସବଜୁଗେସନରେ ଦୀର୍ଘଦିନ ଧରି ରହିଲେ, and the colonial rulers of the states They were reluctant to implement real administrative reforms. Think in case of also British India. Colonial powers, they are interested to naturally they emphasize on the policies which can only protect their own interest of exploitation. Suppose we say that when Britishers came, they like the mercantile or a businessman or the commercial groups and all that. Then gradually they have started establishing their sovereignty, which the principle is known as flag follows the trade. So under the colonial rule, the third world countries were reluctant. Naturally, the administration was reluctant to implement the reforms which are required to devolve the power to the people. Then military in politics is a common phenomenon in third world country. Military intervention. And the number of military takeovers has been continuously rising. These are the problems of the third world countries. Oneko third world countries colonial rule under the royal. Suppose including India. And also there is another problem is that military involvement in politics is a common phenomenon in third world countries. And the number of military takeovers has been continuously rising. Of course, that has not happened in our country. It has happened in other countries, third world countries, not here. So the countries, those who have experienced military takeovers, the military rulers of these countries come to power through an undemocratic process because they want to encroach upon the civil administration. So they have come to power through undemocratic process. But luckily, fortunately, we have not experienced that. But some of our neighboring countries they have experienced several times military takeovers. And in the third world countries where there is military involvement, they come to power through undemocratic process and usually do not fully control the political infrastructure after coming to power. They only are interested to establish supportive infrastructure. So these are the some of the problems being confronted by some of the third world countries. If we come to our country, definitely we have experimented a lot of reforms in our country. In view of the assertions which we have now discussed, the constitutional reforms were promulgated in 1992. ଆମ country କି ଯଦି ଆମେ ଆସିବା ନା 1992 ମସିହାରେ ଆମେ ଯୋଉ 73rd 74th amendment act ଆଣିଲେ, a great deal of debate and speculations on the impact of these constitutional amendments thereon. All the major states, for example, with the exception of Jammu and Kashmir, they have held at least one round of panchayat elections, and in many cases, two successive rounds. But now, I think at the present day, we have many more rounds of panchayat elections and all that taken over. I mean, being conducted in various states. Most commentators they are familiar with the Panchayat Raj and municipal reforms. କାରଣ 73rd 74th Amendment Act ପରେ ସେ ଯୋଉ ରିଫର୍ମସ୍ ଟା ଆସିଲା ତାର ଇମ୍ପାକ୍ଟଟା ଫଙ୍କସନ୍ ପଞ୍ଚାୟତ ରାଜ ସିଷ୍ଟମର ଫଙ୍କସନ୍ ଉପରେ କି ପ୍ରକାର ଭାବରେ ପ୍ରଭାବିତ କଲା ଦ୍ୟାଟ୍ ଇଜ୍ ଅଫ୍ utmost importance. You know, it is evident that states considered to be in the vanguard of the Panchayat Raj reforms, they are concentrated in the west and south of the country, which are relatively better off economically, socially, they are more cohesive, have active civil societies, commitment to the deepening of the reforms process expressed through political will, supportive legislations, bureaucratic openness is an indispensable condition for progress. You know, success of those amendment acts mostly depend on the political will of the state. Supportive legislation गुड़ाक तैयारी करके सेमाने से amendment को implement करिबार sufficient प्रयास बा effort दबा कथा. So the success rate naturally varies from state to state. Structural conditions are also important determinants of the potential for institutional reforms to succeed. Structure is important so that the program can be successful. The implementation of the act can be more effective. Of course, few examples have been given in some of the texts, like some of the states they have introduced the most far-reaching reforms since the introduction of the constitutional amendments, particularly in Kerala and Madhya Pradesh. 73rd, 74th Amendment Act for a few states, for example, Kerala, Madhya Pradesh, they have far-reaching reforms. At the same time, success in implementation of the far-reaching reforms designed to empower panchayats does not guarantee their sustainability. Political commitments to Panchayat Raj has not convincingly demonstrated that it can produce electoral dividends. So people's, despite the popular appeal of the people's planning campaign in Kerala, the party was unable to replicate its strategies and was. It is a scenario in 2001. It was defeated in 2001 state election. Congress in Madhya Pradesh faced a strong challenge from the BJP in 2003, and without any certainty that an appeal to the electorate on the basis of its record of reforms would produce positive results. It is a case study regarding the impact of the reforms. Then there is also reference to deepening democracy. It is generally accepted that political decentralization has largely been successful in that the provisions of the constitutional amendments have been enacted in all states and at least one round of election have been held for all the three tiers of the local governance. And vastly increased number of elected representatives have provided new opportunities for political representation at the local level and especially for women and marginalized sections, the marginalized social groups. Rate of political participation also it has increased, reflected in active campaigning, high level of voters turnout, heightened engagements with the local officials and elected representatives, which in turn have helped to invigorate local democracy. So there are definitely certain positive impact. The Gram Sabhas, of course, continue to function imperfectly. Sometimes it is observed that in spite of the success in some of the directions, Gram Sabhas are not that effective in many states. Since they have limited powers and only meet sporadically. Constitutional provision for reserve seats, particularly for women and scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, distinguishes the current phase of Panchayat Raj reforms from earlier initiatives. କାରଣ ଏଇ ଆମେଣ୍ଡମେଣ୍ଟ ଆକ୍ଟ ଯୋଉଟାକି ଆମେ ଅଲରେଡି ଦୀର୍ଘ ସମୟରେ ଆମେ ମାନେ ପ୍ରିଭିୟସ୍ କ୍ଲାସରେ ଡିସ୍କସ୍ କରିଛେ ସବୁଠାରୁ ଇମ୍ପୋର୍ଟାଣ୍ଟ ପ୍ରୋଭିଜନ ହେଉଛି ରିଜର୍ଭେସନ ଫର ଦ ୱିମେନ୍ scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, and this is one of the Panchayat Raj reforms which is different from the earlier initiatives. The absence of affirmative action ensured a high level of elite dominance in earlier decentralization efforts. Since local vested interests, they played a critical role in panchayat affairs. Reflective of their superior socio-economic and political status, but in the new constitutional dispensation, seat reservations for women and scheduled caste and scheduled tribes provide opportunities for formal representation that more closely approximate population shares. Some surveys have been made or the statistics given and evidence from West Bengal and Kerala, mostly those who have experienced for a long time the leftist governments and all that. That rates of participation in local bodies have increased for women and scheduled castes and tribes, but without a clear and visible impact on local expenditure priorities, service delivery outcomes. This is the statistics and surveys that have been made, they have been undertaken for various states, the success rate of the implementation of this amendment acts and all that. And this is one observation. In case of West Bengal, democratic decentralization has resulted in significant benefits to the poor, especially when combined with land reforms and popular mobilization. In Kerala, the process of popular mobilization through the People's Plan campaigning, it has ensured the active involvement of the scheduled castes and women in decision making in panchayats, and naturally that has resulted in a flow of benefits to these groups because their participation was more and active, so they could extract more of benefits from the process. In other states, seat reservations have increased from formal representation in panchayat bodies for women and SC/STs, but in the absence of comparative data, the overall impact of affirmative action is difficult to discern. The best available evidence concerns the participation of women, but this is largely from a small and unrepresentative selection of states and localities. So, studies from Karnataka indicate that women have made some heavyway in Gram Panchayats by using reserve seats as a vantage point. to shape local development priorities. So evidence from Karnataka it demonstrates how men often continue to influence the panchayat affairs through female relatives who have been elected in positions of authority in panchayats. And there are also numerous instances where women elected to local office have faced also violence, and in some cases they are also subjected to harassment and all that. So these responses are magnified for scheduled caste and tribe women who face social ostracism, non-cooperation by virtue of their gender and caste status. So it is these are some of the surveys and researches being conducted in various states. These are few examples and all that. But it is more difficult to ascertain the impact of the Panchayat Raj reforms on scheduled castes and tribes in the absence of detailed research. And available evidence indicates that the enhanced numerical presence in panchayat institutions of women and men from the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe generally not translated into sustained pro-poor development outcomes, at least not a significant level. Without a much greater devolution of financial resources, the potential development impact of the decentralization it shall remain limited. The fact that health remains subject to highly centralized forms of provisions, it means that representatives have little influence over at the local level. These are observations. These representatives they have very little influence on the service delivery system. But service delivery system is to be effective because through this delivery system only the results can reach the people. Regarding financial devolution, also there are reports, surveys, and all that researches. Financial decentralization has progressed to a very limited extent. As the resource flows are determined by the implementational guidelines for state and central government anti-poverty schemes. And the scope for local revenue mobilization is very restricted and it results in high level of dependence on fund flow from the higher levels of government. ତେଣୁ ପ୍ରତ୍ୟେକ ସମୟରେ ଦେଖାଗଲା ଯେ ଲୋକାଲ ଇନଷ୍ଟିଟ୍ୟୁସନ ଗୁଡ଼ାକ ସେମାନଙ୍କର କୌଣସି ସ୍କିମ୍କୁ successfully implement କରିବା ପାଇଁ they'll have to look for the financial assistance granted from the center or the state, from the higher levels of government. And elected representatives, especially in Gram Panchayat, minimal influence over the local expenditure priorities. So this is naturally that means so far as overall भाବରେ ଦେଖିବାକୁ ଗଲେ so far as the financial devolution is concerned, it is not that successful because still at the lower level these local bodies they depend on financial assistance from the higher bodies like the state or the center. So most state governments in India they're experiencing fiscal deficits and are reluctant to devolve greater expenditure autonomy to local governments. The budget for capital expenditure is very limited since recurrent salary costs absorb the lion's share of resources and the bureaucracy is very resistant to reform. Most of the allocations would have a salary expenditure development scheme is being left. So political commitment alone cannot ensure well functioning of Panchayat Raj institutions and urban bodies. There must be a real transfer of sufficient powers, responsibility, and financial resources. And good political commitment, very well. There must be a real transfer of authority, devolution of power, and also the resources to the lower levels of the government. Extremely uneven progress of fiscal devolution and financial devolution, very uneven. For the most part, development resources are tied into programs determined by the state and they are subject to narrowly specified spending parameters and end users. And there is also researches that which states have developed relatively, I mean, in a better position and all that. But the researches conducted are not very recent most. So the present status must be different. And at this moment, we have not sufficient, access to the sufficient data regarding the status or regarding the success rate of the functioning of the Panchayat Raj institutions in various states. Because most of the survey reports are from 1996, 97 and all that. But we'll have to rather refer to the recent most statistics and surveys. Effective devolution of decision making on expenditure priorities and to some extent revenue raising powers is always a critical element of successful decentralization initiatives. So political representation without responsibility for raising the resources and determining the expenditure priorities within the devolved budget is a very limited form of decentralization. And definitely this can undermine the legitimacy and commitment of the elected representatives at the local level. So fiscal devolution, financial devolution has a direct bearing on the democratic character of developmental potential of the Panchayat Raj institution. प्रत्येक क्षेत्र से आपण जब यूनियन स्टेट रिलेशनशिप पढ़ुଛନ୍ତି फाइनेंशियल रिलेशनशिप ये देखिबा the union administration is stronger. So state for most of their development activities have to look towards the candidates. Think of income tax, for example. The resource distribution is so that the center is financially stronger. Likewise, Panchayat Raj system गुड़ाकू political devolution of power केवल देदेले हबो नाही. Fiscal devolution is most important. Increased availability of the resources in panchayats does not guarantee that expenditure priorities generate development and poverty reduction. Since these outcomes are a function of a representativeness of the panchayat bodies, the extent and the depth of political participation and powers vested with the local interest to exert influence as well as broader structural factors which condition the development outcomes. Local bodies also should be given more of resource raising powers, resource raising authority. Then also we can have a brief discussion on administrative decentralization. So apart from this financial or fiscal devolution of power, limitations on devolution of fiscal powers relates closely to the performance on administrative decentralization. And also many scholars they also opine like the fiscal devolution also in this sphere of political administrative decentralization. The scope also is very limited for the local bodies. In spite of the formal provisions for transfer of responsibility to the lower tier of the local government and legislation, governing transfer of development functions to the Gram Panchayats, progress has become uneven. And practically speaking, few states have developed significant decision making responsibilities to the local government. But in most cases, there is a limited devolution of administrative powers. The role of the local officials is largely confined to the implementation of the development programs only. For example, health and education programs are formulated by the line ministries at the state level. But responsibility of implementing the bureaucrats in the local level, in the local administrative level. So state ministry shall decide the policies regarding health and education. But the responsibility of the implementation lies with the administrative personnel of the local bodies. So most states they have been unable to effect transfer of staff from the state to the lower tiers of the government. Senior bureaucrats resist transfer on the grounds that educational opportunities are more restricted outside the major urban centers and because of the possible consequences on future promotions. So, no state in India has managed to make significant progress on staff transfers to local governments or to ensure effective oversight by elected representatives over local officials. So, bureaucrats in local governments, especially Gram Panchayat secretaries, they continue to exercise considerable influence over elected representatives as they are privy to information contained in the government orders that may not be readily accessible to the elected representatives. Official procedure, official records, official order content को accessibility local representatives ମାନଙ୍କର ବହୁତ କମ ଥିବା ହେତୁ the bureaucrats operating in this gram panchayat level they are taking on upper hand. So bureaucrats operating in the lower level, particularly gram panchayat level, they continue to exercise considerable influence over the elected representatives because they have less of accessibility to the rules, procedures. ସେମାନେ ସେଥିରେ ଅନଭିଜ୍ଞ the content of the rules or the orders of the government. So, based on the criterion of deepening democracy, there is little doubt that the reforms in local government in the early 1990s have widened the terrain of political engagement, while affirmative action has broadened participation in local institutions. Even while there are constraints, restrictions on the powers and responsibilities of the elected officials. On the development impact of the reforms, it is more difficult to make generalizations because the powers of panchayats they vary considerably from state to state. They vary. That is why impact of the reform cannot be assessed uniformly. Difficult to assess it. A small number of states continue to make steady progress in the implementation of reforms to strengthen Panchayat Raj institutions through increased resource flow to panchayats or by empowering Gram Sabhas to demand accountability from elected representatives. As you know, an active civil society also helps to promote state action through advocacy and monitoring of the progress of implementation of the constitutional provisions. Non-governmental organizations can play a supportive role by offering training for elected representatives or local officials and information about the powers and responsibilities. But their role is not critical to successful outcomes. But successful exercise of the role by the voluntary sectors, civil society organizations depends on their awareness, also their commitment to the interest of the people. So I think I must wind up within 5 minutes. In regard to the people's aspiration, two important questions always arise. What are the people's aspirations and how to get them fulfilled? What are the aspirations and how to fulfill them? As far as the first question is concerned, it may be said people's aspirations include equity, that is social justice, people's participation in decision making, implementation, monitoring, evaluation, sharing the benefits of. So, in spite of the best efforts of the policy planners and implementing agencies, right from the community development programs to the present day, we have badly failed in meeting the people's aspiration due to the lack of popular participation. The past experience with our Panchayat Raj institutions or urban local bodies, it suggests that they had been incapable in harmonious local community, minimizing the quarrels or the feuds, factional fighting, and also protecting collective interest. So there are certain prerequisites for survival of these PRIs. There should be commitment to the Panchayat Raj and municipalities as a political value. It should not be forgotten that the effort to revitalize Panchayat Raj and municipalities, in fact, is an attempt to reconstruct Indian polity by way of bringing so far deprived sections into the mainstream. Then the PRIs and the urban local bodies should be treated as a single agency for development for rural, urban, local bodies. And as a corollary to the second question, what are the and how to get them fulfilled, the aspirations fulfilled. Another question also can arise whether 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts will be able to meet the hope and aspiration of the people. But in answer to this, it may be said that at least on paper it appears that the PRIs and urban local bodies will be in a position to meet the hopes. Our assumption is based on the fact that the very element of popular participation which was missing till now, may be entrusted by the present act. So, enough care has been taken to make Gram Sabhas more effective at the grassroots democracy. Since district and decentralized planning has been emphasized in 74th Constitutional Amendment Act and district planning councils they have been constituted, it is hoped that a need-based planning reflecting the hope and aspiration of the people will be the usual feature. The constitution of the State Finance Commission and provision for effective local tax administration in the Act also present a rosy picture about the financial health of the Panchayat Raj institutions and also the urban local bodies. So, with regard to the future futuristic trends in Panchayat Raj and municipal politics, effectivity of Gram Sabha, changing social relationship and emerging social movements, and similar optimism has been expressed by many social scientists. For example, you can quote Rajani Kothari. He's of the opinion that as a system of managing the affairs of the society, the long experienced mod of top-down has failed. Top-down model has failed. And it is against this failure that the rise of the new actors and labels, new forms of political expressions, and new definition of the content of grassroots politics acquire significance. So, it is in this background that we feel that rural development it will rise to the occasion, and also the ruralites also can see a future of a bright local bodies which could fulfill the hopes and aspirations of the people in the years to come. So let us hope that with the implementation of these acts, both the people residing in the grassroots level, in the rural and also in the urban sector, can see a ray of hope in these local institutions. And we end up the discussion with an optimistic note that we can hope for a better future where local bodies, local institutions, in the process of democratic decentralization, can meet the aspiration of the people of India. Thank you. It is already 7:31. I think we have almost covered many relevant topics under this subject called decentralization and local governance. So I think with this, I end up my discussion and to say goodbye to all of you. So should I leave the platform or any further discussions on that? Hello, my dear listeners. I think it's time already. It is 7:32. So I should say goodbye to all of you. So best wishes to all of you. Thank you. Should I leave the platform? Hello, listeners.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. So I'm leaving the platform.